Hello, all. It's me again. As always, I'm so glad and happy to introduce to all of you this new series called the Questionnaire series. So, what are we going to do different in this series? In our previous series, we would have taken each concept individually and we have dived deep into it and we understood the concepts better. But in this series, it's just going to be a Q&A series wherein I will handpick certain 5 questions in each episode and I will discuss the answers of each questions in detail through this video. These questions may align with the videos that I have already released or it can be out of it, but rather it could be an interesting question that's worth discussing. I will also be taking up the questions that I am being shot at in the comment section. I'll take it to this platform and I will discuss those questions as well. So this series is dedicated only for Q&A sessions. So let's directly jump on to the 5 questions that we are going to see for today. The key differences between domain and data element. Can we have a data element created without domain? What are all the fields in data element that are affected by the changes in data types? And what are all the fields in domain that are affected by the changes in data types? And what are all the fields in data elements that are affected by the changes in data types? And the last question is, how will you know if the domain has any custom values assigned and to which fixed value does it belong to? So moving on to our first question, the elemental difference between the domain and data element. If you have seen my previous videos, you already know the answers for this. You would have already come across the same slide, but still, it's very elemental and it's very important we discuss this again. Let's hit to the answers. The first one is the domain is used to define the technical attributes, whereas the data element, in addition to the technical attributes, they define the semantic attributes as well. So let me take you through a particular data element here in specific. So if you see here, this is a data element. So the technical attributes is what you see, the data type and length. But what is it semantic attributes? This is what you define here, the field labels that you provide for this particular data element and the short description. So all these contribute to the semantic definition. Whereas in domain, let me take you through a domain. In domain, you will be having only the technical attributes defined here, the data type, number of characters, decimal places, and the other characteristics like what are all the values that it can hold in the fixed value tabs and the value table. So all these contribute to the technical characteristics. So that's what we are discussing here. It is used to define the technical attributes, whereas the data element used to define, in addition to the technical attributes, they define the semantic attributes as well. So the domain is used to maintain the consistency between the fields which uses the domain, whereas the data element is used when field has to be differentiated from the end user or business perspective. Now take this interesting table K and A1. You have two different fields which we discussed before, name 1 and name 2. Both of them are assigned with different data element. But if you go get into the domain part, the first one has name as the domain and the second one also has the name as the domain. So whenever I do some changes into this domain, it gets affected. It gets applied for both these fields. Whereas whenever this data element I make any changes, it only gets affected to the respective fields. Now, why do I have a different data element for each? Because the short description of both these data element and the field level description is different for both these fields, right? So this is what I meant. It is the data element is used to differentiate the fields from a business perspective, whereas the domain is used to maintain the consistency between the fields. By having the same domain in these two fields, you maintain the consistency. So that is the second point that we are discussing here. So domain cannot be referred in the program directly, whereas data element can be referred. For example, I'll take you through a quick program. So here I have referred a program. I have referred a data element, right? This is a data element. And if I try to activate it, it gets activated. Now, when I assign a domain, which we have just seen, the same domain which I showed you here. So ZYTDM is a domain. So when I try to mention this domain here and try to activate it, it will throw an error that this is unknown. So this is what I meant here. A domain cannot be referred in the program directly, whereas a data element can be referred in the programs. So these are all some unique characteristics with respect to domain. The fixed values, value tables, etc. are all some unique characteristics of domain, whereas the documentation part, the field label are all unique characteristics of data element. So these are all the fundamental differences between the domain and data element. So moving on, can we have a data element created without domain assigned? Yes, we can, using direct assignment of predefined data types. So here in this particular radio button, I have marked it especially. I have marked it specially here so that you have better understanding. But still, we'll go ahead and we'll create it as well. Now, for instance, let me go to our favorite data element that we have already created. Okay, I am going to the change mode. So here you see there is a data element that is already assigned. So what I will do, I'll switch on to the built-in data type, and I will assign the same data type scar and 10, and I try to activate. It still gets activated. You see, I have not assigned any domain here. I am directly using it as a built-in type, and I can still use it in the program. When I try to activate it via the program, it still gets activated, right? And if you see, double click here, and if you reach out, you can see the built-in data type assigned. So yes, the answer to this particular question is yes, we can create data elements without defining domains to it. So moving on to my next question, what are all the fields in data element that are affected by the changes in the data types? Now this is an interesting question. Now let me take you through the same domain that we have created. Now consider I am changing this particular data type length from 10 to 11, and I try to activate. So what happens? There is an error. When you click on the error, it says the type of search cell parameter is incompatible, because when you go to the further characteristics of search help, you have a search help assigned. And what is the data type of this particular KUNNR field? We can go ahead and we can check the same. If we check the data type of this particular field KUNNR, it will be character 10, right? So basically it is discussing about this particular search help, wherein in this search help we have a selection method, and we have a field, I mean KUNNR field is already assigned for the search help. If you check the data type of this particular search help field, it is character 10, right? So we can get into the selection method directly to check the data type. So here if you see KUNNR is here, and the data element of it is char 10. Okay, but what we are trying to do here, we are trying to increase the length from 10 to 11, which makes it is incompatible with the search help that is assigned. So search help is the first field that is affected when you change the data type. And second is, now when I revert the changes from 11 to 10 and try to get activated, it activates. Now second is when I change the data type from character to currency. Okay, you will see the length is 10, and there is a new field introduced called decimal places. So this is decimal places is the second field that gets affected when there is a change in the data type. Now moving on to the slide, this is what I have discussed. So search helps, the length and the decimal places are the two fields that gets directly affected whenever you make changes to the data element, I mean data types of a data element. Now, let us do the same for a domain. Our next question is revolving uh, around the domain part. Like, for example, if we take in case of a domain, what are all the fields in domain that are affected by the changes in the data type? For this, we'll move ahead with one of our custom domain that we have created, ZYTDM. So, what I'm practically going to do here is I'm trying to change the data element here, and I'm trying to understand what are all the changes that it takes. Now, for example, first we have a currency field here. As soon as I have a currency data type, you have this case sensitive field disabled. Now, when I make it a char, you have now everything here gets changes. The output length, the decimal places, everything automatically gets changes. You see, now the decimal places will become 0 and grayed out, and the sign field gets grayed out, whereas the case sensitive field will be now enabled, right? And if you go to value range, and you can create any values here, say 111, and I go give it as test 1, and I can still activate it. Okay, I may get some warnings. The output length 4 is greater than the calculated one. This is because of this particular field. Again, this output length is 4, whereas I have given the number of characters as 3 only. So now if you activate it, gets activated without warning. So you can even define fixed values when you assign a character data type. Now, when I assign a currency data type, if you see here, the fixed value definition is not allowed for data type currency, right? So decimal places are to be corrected for the currency data type, right? Now continue. Now output length 3 is less than the calculated length output 4. Now continue. You see all those fields which were grayed out before, the decimal places will now get enabled, and you are not allowed to maintain any fixed values in case of a currency data type. So I will delete that. I'll come back. Now I have three characters of which two is decimal places, and I will be having one point in between to indicate the decimal. So totally I need to have output length. So that's what it has indicated here. Now if I try to activate, it gets activated. So this is what I meant. Whenever there is a change in the data type of a domain, you have the case sensitive field getting affected, you have the decimal places getting affected, you have the sign field getting affected, and you have the value ranges getting affected. So these are all the four fields that are affected when you change the data type of a domain. Now moving on to the next question, which is the last and final question, an interesting question. How will you know if the domain has any custom values assigned to, and how will you know to which fixed value does it belong? Now, I have given the answer on a screenshot, but I would rather show it in the system. Now, if you take in case of this domain, we don't have any fixed values defined for it. And basically for custom domains, the fixed value concept is not relevant at all because you can directly go and add the values there. Now, take in case of the standard domain, I have already added the fixed values for you just to save some time. If you see here, whenever there is a fixed values appended to it, you will have a separate column called fixed value append, and you will have the difference in the coloring of the standard fixed values and the custom fixed values. So all the things that are not in white color and all the line items that has a value in the fixed value append column is part of the custom fixed value which we have appended. Now if you see here, there is two different fixed values that are appended. One is z test 1 and another one is z test 2. Now if I double click on this fixed value 1, I mean z test 1, it is the first fixed value append. I'm trying to append it, and it has only these two values, AB and CD. And to relate the same, if you see, only AB and ZD will be assigned to fixed value z test 1 and z test 1. Whereas the next two fixed values, which is XY and ZZ, are assigned to z test 2. Now, if you go to this fixed value, if you can find only XY and ZZ, right? So this is how this extra column, which is present here, will help us indicates that there is a fixed value, that is the custom fixed values are assigned to this particular domain, and the custom fixed values to which fixed value they belong to will be found out using this value what you see in this column. Okay, so as far as this particular domain is concerned, there are two different fixed values appended. One is z test, which has AB, I mean z test 1, which has AB and CD. There is another fixed value append which is XY and ZZ, which holds XY and ZZ. Now, this particular column will not even exist if there is no fixed values present. For example, I go to this fixed value append option, and you see these two present. What I'm trying to do is I'll delete both. Okay, I'm deleting the first one. Now I come back and I delete the second one as well. So whenever I delete it, the domain has to be reactivated again so that the changes gets reflected, right? Now, as soon as the fixed values are deleted and I try to reactivate it, you could see the column for fixed value append vanishes, which means that there is no custom fixed value that are appended. Even if you drop down, you will not have any custom values. So after 9, you will not have any custom values assigned there. Simple, right? So using this technique, we can find out if a fixed values are appended to a standard domain. If appended, we can also find out which fixed value append is used and what are all the values that belong to each fixed value append. So all these details we can find out using this single screen. So friends, that's all for today. I think we have discussed 5 elemental questions in detail, and now you will be having a better understanding on these concepts. So the idea behind this series is you will get to have an clearer understanding in a quicker way than diving deep into the concepts. I mean, or before diving deep into the concepts, these question and answers will help you to have a better understanding on the same concepts. Thank you so much for being patient, and I expect to come up with more videos with more handpicked questions on the same series. Thank you all for the time. Peace and blessings.